The camera pans slowly over ivy-clad buildings, their stone walls glowing in the late afternoon sun, serene and timeless. Students hurry across manicured quads, laughing, carrying books, oblivious to the secrets buried beneath their feet. The narration begins, low, deliberate, weighted with foreboding. Beneath these walls, beneath polished lecture halls, centuries of scholarship and prestige, lies a truth the textbooks never teach. A filthy truth. Millions of dollars earned from human suffering. Hidden in dusty ledgers, in letters with wax seals, in the very foundation of the knowledge we revere. The screen shifts to the interiors of dim, quiet archives. Faded parchment, ink blurred with age, names written with precision, numbers, calculations, and the unspeakable addition of human beings as property. For generations, students walked these halls, believing they studied in pursuit of enlightenment. Yet every brick, every scholarship, every library endowed with wealth, carries the ghost of enslaved labor. It whispers in the margins of history, a presence ignored but impossible to erase. Fade to a slow close-up of a ledger. A line item reads, in delicate, looping handwriting, Negro man. Age 25, bequeathed to university by plantation estate, value $800. The narrator's voice grows more urgent, breaking through the quiet of the archive. These aren't just numbers. They are people. Fathers, mothers, children, their lives traded, their labor stolen. And yet the institutions built upon their suffering continue to stand proud, polished, untouchable. The narration sweeps across time, darkening as we move into the 17th and 18th centuries. Ships dock in colonial ports, holding barrels of sugar, bales of cotton, and human cargo. Plantation owners flourish, sending profits north to universities, funding endowments and construction, cementing centuries of influence and wealth. These universities were designed as temples of intellect, yet at their foundations lies the unthinkable, an empire of human exploitation. For every lecture delivered, for every library funded, a slave labored in the fields, in the kitchens, in the hidden corners of estates, their sweat, their pain, their very lives converting into endowments and prestige. The screen shows the three unnamed universities, grand halls, stone steps, towering libraries. Their faces serene, almost untouchable. Names of benefactors are celebrated, streets named after their families, but the documents they hid tell a different story. One of greed, ambition, and the silent suffering of those who built them. Cut to letters, carefully penned instructions for the management of plantations. The estate shall continue its annual gift to the university. One reads, including all proceeds from the sale of crops and the labor of enslaved persons as directed. The narrator pauses, letting the weight sink in. Some of these documents were burned. Others locked away in secret vaults. Some were hidden in the backs of law books, folded between parchment, nearly forgotten. But history never sleeps. It whispers in the cracks. It waits for those willing to look. Zoom in on archival hands, carefully unrolling aged letters, revealing names, numbers, ages, human beings reduced to lines in financial reports. 20-year-old woman, 10 children, value $1,200, assigned to fund library expansion. These pages hold the lives that built knowledge, yet never saw it themselves. The contradiction is brutal, filthy, haunting. The camera cuts to the architecture of a university campus at dusk, bell towers silhouetted, shadows stretching across cobblestones. The narrator continues, voice grave. For the students, for the professors, for the wealthy donors, the world was neat, logical, rational. For the enslaved, it was terror, labor, silence. Every brick laid, every scholarship endowed, every lecture hall built rested on chains. The institutions that claimed to celebrate freedom, education, and enlightenment were financed by bondage, by suffering no one wanted to speak about. Cut to slow-motion shots. Archival photos of plantations, fields stretching endlessly, the faint silhouettes of enslaved men, women, and children bending beneath unbearable weight. And the irony is relentless. The same universities that taught morality, law, and philosophy simultaneously profited from the most obscene violation of human rights. The contradiction is not accidental. It is systemic, intentional, brilliantly hidden, and deeply, inescapably human. The camera lingers on faded pages with ink bleeding, as if crying the names of the people whose lives were monetized. The narrator leans in, voice quieter, heavier with accusation. Every ledger, every will, every secret letter is a testament. A testament not to education alone, but to exploitation. Every dollar, every bequest, every endowment that built these institutions carries a ghost, someone who labored so that others could learn, while they themselves were denied life, liberty, and dignity. The visuals fade to the quads at night, empty, silent, shadows stretching across the buildings, as if to mask the truths buried beneath centuries of ivy. The papers do not lie, the archives do not forgive, and the ghosts of those who built these walls still whisper, asking one question: what will we do when we finally listen? Cliffhanger. For decades, these secrets were buried, hidden by generations of pride and denial. But now, the documents have begun to speak. And when they speak, the world cannot look away. The screen fades in on flickering candlelight, illuminating stacks of yellowed papers, the edges curling like the memory of forgotten lives. The camera lingers on the words carefully etched by hands long gone. Bequest includes enslaved persons, all labor to fund construction and scholarships. The narrator's voice is deliberate, heavy with accusation and sorrow. These papers are more than history. They are the lifeblood of stolen futures. They reveal a network of complicity, trustees, benefactors, professors, and administrators all entwined in a web spun from the pain of the enslaved. Invisible hands built these walls. Invisible hands wrote these ledgers. Invisible voices cried out, silenced by ink and authority. Cut to slow-motion visuals of university quads. Students walk briskly, heads down, backpacks swinging, unaware that the knowledge they chase rests on bodies denied freedom. The narration continues. Consider this. While students debated ethics, philosophy, and justice within these very halls, enslaved men and women in distant plantations produced the wealth that paid for lecture halls, dormitories, and libraries. Their labor was invisible, their suffering invisible, their lives quantified as dollar amounts in accounts labeled donations, endowments, and bequests. The moral dissonance is staggering, unspeakable, and yet meticulously documented. The camera zooms in on the delicate handwriting of 18th century correspondence. A benefactor writes to the university board, "Ensure that the plantation profits are secured. The enslaved persons remain under my oversight, but their labor shall be allocated to your construction fund." The narrator's voice lowers, emphasizing the raw inhumanity. This is how morality was purchased. How knowledge was bought with sweat, blood, and the shattered bodies of those they considered property. Every record, every ledger, every line is a reminder. Education did not merely ignore slavery, it thrived on it. Fade to archival footage of enslaved laborers in fields, their silhouettes bending beneath the weight of endless toil, their faces indistinct, but their humanity undeniable. The narration grows more somber. The impact on enslaved communities was devastating. Families torn apart, children sold to fund scholarships, husbands and wives separated so that universities could expand their prestige. Generations lost. Generations unaware that their labor built the intellectual foundations of the nation. Cut to modern campus life. Students taking selfies by monumental columns, oblivious to the past. The narrator's tone sharpens. For centuries, the truth was buried. The documents hidden, destroyed, or ignored. Universities flourished, while the memories of those who built them were erased from the story. Yet every archive that survived, every ledger that endured, becomes a voice screaming across time, demanding recognition, accountability, and justice. The camera moves through the dim stacks of the library, papers dust-covered, fragile. Letters discuss profits, taxes, and allocations from plantations. The narration emphasizes. Some benefactors even calculated the monetary value of enslaved persons when donating to universities, a grotesque equation equating human lives with fiscal gain. Yet, for decades, these numbers remained invisible to students, invisible to the public, invisible to the conscience of the nation. Until now. Cut to historians examining the archives, their hands shaking slightly as they uncover the records. The voice continues, layered with reverence and anger. Through painstaking research, investigators pieced together the hidden stories. They traced donations from plantations, correlated endowments to specific enslaved people, and reconstructed the human cost behind some of the country's most revered universities. The evidence is clear. Nearly $500 million flowed from the labor of the enslaved directly into academic institutions. The visuals shift to interviews with descendants of enslaved people, their faces etched with sorrow and disbelief. The narrator continues, voice resonant. For the descendants, it is a living trauma. The wealth enjoyed by institutions for centuries was extracted from their ancestors' bodies, lives, and futures. Recognition of this debt remains incomplete, often superficial, and too frequently ignored. Cut to archival documents being projected on a screen in a dim lecture hall. A professor points to lines itemizing enslaved individuals' ages, skills, and monetary value. The narrator whispers, almost conspiratorially, these documents reveal complicity at every level. Trustees, administrators, and donors not only profited but actively concealed their methods. Letters instructed secrecy. Ledgers were coded. Facts erased from public knowledge. Education, in its highest form, was built on the lowest humanity hidden, systemic exploitation of the enslaved. Transition to modern protests, activism, and student-led campaigns demanding reparations and recognition. The narration continues, rising in intensity. Activists uncovered the trail, bringing these truths into the light. Students marched, historians published, journalists documented, all seeking to reconcile the unthinkable. The realization that the very institutions that proclaim enlightenment were financed with suffering. The response from universities varies. Some offered apologies, token scholarships, or memorials. Others resisted, preserving myth over truth, prestige over justice. The camera lingers on a quiet campus at night, shadows stretching across the lawns. The narrator softens, reflective yet haunting. The challenge remains. How does a society reconcile with wealth built on chains? How do we honor the lives whose labor funded knowledge they could never access? These documents are not just history, they are mirrors, reflecting our own complicity in ignoring injustice, in celebrating achievement at the expense of humanity. Slow fade to archival pages dissolving into candlelight, students walking across quads, oblivious. The camera, focusing on a single footprint in the mud, a silent trace, a whisper of the past. And so the story continues to speak. Education, revered and untouchable, hides dirty truths beneath polished floors. The past is not dead. It whispers from the archives, demanding recognition, demanding accountability, demanding that we ask ourselves, if knowledge is power, who holds it and at whose cost?